Welcome to Lead Actors, where we dive deep into the world of movies to explore the art and science of leadership with Kieran Murphy, executive coach, leadership expert and movie fan. Each week, we'll dissect iconic characters, memorable scenes, and timeless stories to uncover powerful lessons on leadership. Whether you're a movie buff, a leader looking for inspiration, or simply curious about what makes great leaders tick, you're in the right place. So, let's get started.
Mr. Tyler, permission to speak freely.
Of course, Chief.
This is the Navy, where a commanding officer is a mighty and terrible thing. A man to be feared and respected, all-knowing, all-powerful. Don't you dare say what you said to the boys back there again, I don't know. Those 3 words will kill a crew, dead as a depth charge. You're the skipper now, and the skipper always knows what to do, whether he does or not.
Today's episode, we're going to be looking at U571. This is a movie a few years old now, but something that really stuck with me is its portrayal of leadership. Now, if you've not seen it, I'd heavily encourage you to do that. We are going to get into possibly some spoilers, but it's a great film with Matthew McConaughey as the lead, and he's got a great supporting cast, including Harvey Keitel. Now, the scene that we just watched, Harvey Keitel is the chief. Now, the chief in the Navy is the most senior non-commissioned officer. This is something that is actually quite close to my heart because that was the role that my dad had in the Navy. So I found this scene fascinating because the chief is someone who technically is not an officer, in quotes, but is certainly someone who's senior and has the respect of the crew. And you'll see that in different scenes in the movie where Matthew McConaughey has this leadership position, this position as the captain thrust upon him. It's not necessarily something that he's asked for. It's not something he wants. It certainly isn't something that he's ready for. And in the scene preceding this one, what we see is Matthew McConaughey not knowing what to do. He is stumped. He doesn't know what the solution is. And worse still, he actually says that in front of the crew. And this is the response that the chief is giving to him. Leadership in the Navy, in the armed forces, there are obvious differences between that and in the business world because, of course, the stakes, one would argue, are quite higher. In this particular movie, this is life and death that they're talking about. They're trying to get the Enigma coding machine from the Germans during World War II, and they've run into difficulties. The skipper, the original captain, of course, is no longer around. I won't get into details on that, but Matthew McConaughey is now in charge, and we've just seen him say, "I don't know." Now, this is really interesting because I love this line. The skipper skipper always knows what to do, even when he doesn't. I think that's a great line because it really explains that in the face of real leadership, a decision has to be made and responsibility has to be taken. There's lots of really good examples of that in movies, in literature. Interestingly enough, in the novel World War Z or World War Z, there is a similar sort of story about a captain in a submarine. And he also is in an untenable position and has to make a decision. And he ultimately does. He makes a terribly difficult decision and chooses the responsibility over what he wants to do. There is challenging scene where he actually has to essentially cause the death of many, many people, and he chooses to do so. Similarly, in another book based on the Navy, it's Master and Commander, Far Side of the World. Great movie. We'll definitely be talking about that at some stage. And that also has these life and death situations. And this is really interesting when it comes to task-driven leadership versus relationship-driven leadership. And fluctuating between the two is essentially transformational leadership. What that means is you're going to have situations which are where you have to focus on the task, situations where you have to focus on the relationship, and an excellent leader pivots between the two. So if you think about it, in these situations, in U571, for instance, this is a life and death situation. Relationships, feelings, empathy are important for the maintenance of the crew, but not when you're in a situation which is untenable on life and death. So, for instance, if the submarine is sinking and people are about to die, the skipper is not going to be concerned about upsetting people by yelling or making sure that people are okay and their feelings are not hurt, of course. He's not going to be, I don't want to raise my voice, I don't want to upset anyone, but if everyone could make their way to the edge of then we can all be, he's going to be screaming, he's going to be shouting, because the task in the situation is far more important. And you think about that translates very much so into the workplace. There are times when the task is absolutely of vital importance, and that has to be the focus. A deadline or something. It might not be life and death, but it's something very, very important. Conversely, there are times when maintenance of good relationships are also important. That's when maybe things are at less of a high stake. Maybe that's when things are easier, and it's important that everyone would work as a team and know what they should be doing. So, in this situation, the skipper knows what to do even when he doesn't. What I take from that is Harvey Keitel's character is not suggesting that he make it up and pretend he knows what he's doing. What I take from it is that making a decision is far more important. I heard recently on a podcast a great analogy which I think really fits in this, which it was actually a retired Navy SEAL, so again, a military connection, but he was saying how if you stand still in the woods, you die. You make no decision. So what you do is you walk in a direction. And if that ends up being the wrong direction, well, at least you know that. And then you pivot, you move, you change direction and go in a different one. And I see this actually in my coaching sessions, people almost suffering twice and making no decision, inaction, or delaying a decision is in some ways worse, because the outcome is still the same. Eventually you're going to have to make a decision, and it could still be the wrong one. So you've postponed that, you've lived in that limbo phase, you've been paused, you're not happy, and then you still have to make that decision, that tough decision, one way or the other. Additionally, the alternative, of course, would be to just essentially say, right, this is what we're doing. If it's a good decision, it's made. People see that. If it's a bad decision, then it's still made, but then you immediately are able to pivot. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid or ripping off a plaster. You immediately know what to do. So what I take from this scene, and what I definitely have applied and learned, is this idea that when people are in a position of leadership, I think any kind of wishy-washy, not being able to make a decision, and we'll see this in other examples, that's scary for people, that's scary for a crew, that's scary for a team. and making a decision with a surety, albeit a risky one or one that might not pay off. Nobody is right 100% of the time. Making a decision is better than making no decision. And I would even argue that making a bad decision is better than making no decision, because at least you know you've committed to something, action has happened, and you can move forward. No decision eventually means that you're going to have to choose, and you still might make the wrong choice. So, great example in this scene. I love the candor of Harvey Keitel's character. I thought it really resonated with me. It's a great movie, and there are other parts of the movie I'm sure that we'll look into, as well as other examples. But this is a really great example of someone offering that very difficult feedback, very hard to share that. He's almost admonishing the captain not to do this, because in his words, that'll kill a crew. And maybe that means in a literal sense. Maybe it does. So great movie, great scene, and definitely encourage you to watch it. We're going to be doing lots more movies. If there's a movie you'd like me to look at, please add it in the comments. Thanks very much. See you on the next one.